Good evening, Redskin fans. Welcome into episode 4 of the Skinscast show. And it is with a extremely heavy heart that we come to you tonight to recap the disaster in the Bayou. Wow. If last week was a gut punch, this was a straight up throat punch. It's almost a game you're speechless on. I don't know how many of you lived through the Norv Turner era. It was a constant barrage of heartbreaking losses and what could have been. And this game just really felt like that type of game when it was all over. You were just sitting amongst the rubble of what had been a great empire. Obviously, I'm overstating it a little bit, but wow. What just a bad way to lose a football game. I guess we'll dive right in. We talked last week, if the Redskins were going to have a chance to win this game, they were going to have to steal a couple of possessions. And they did that. They did it with the first turnover of the game by DJ Swearinger on the Saints' opening drive. Led to 3 points. And they did it with the fake punt, which we'll get to that a little bit later. It created the momentum for the Redskins to go down and score on that drive. So in so many ways, things went so well in this game that it's still amazing to me how wrong it went and how fast it went wrong. Offensively, I think when it was all said and done, it's by far their best performance of the year in terms of what they got out of the running game, the passing game. Kirk Cousins in this game was on fire. I think every week this guy just continues to answer the bell. He continues to answer the big questions that surround him. Some of his passes in this game, the fourth down pass to Vernon Davis, the 26-yarder, I mean, just a dime. The two touchdowns. Now, they had two wide open touchdowns. Great play design, but the one to Ryan Clark, I mean, he stood in there and he knew he was going to get destroyed, and he still put the ball exactly where it needed to be. I think in a lot of ways this was his best game of the season, just in terms of how he fought, some of the shots he took, he had a couple of real nice scrambles, and again, just really accurate, especially downfield. And there's so many stats building up now because the narrative on Kirk Cousins, it kind of began last year as he was basically just check down Charlie. And that's not the case. He's in the top 5 in the NFL right through game 10 for the Redskins, but through week 11 in air yards, passes that travel more than 20 yards down the field. He is the top-rated passer off of play action in the NFL. And, folks, I mean, it's a good field that he's leading in numbers like that. 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Count them. 5, okay? We've played 10 games. So, to me, he just continues to check the boxes here. We'll get to the end of the game stuff in just a second. But, again, when you look at what he's doing early in the game, he was able to get Josh Dotson involved. Late in the game, it was more Jamison Crowder. You saw Vernon Davis. Again, Ryan Clark got in the mix. This guy just continues to make it work with whoever's out there, and that's the other narrative that Kirk Cousins is putting to bed. And that is, well, the only reason he put big numbers up is because of who he had around him. He had Pierre Garçon, and he had Deshaun Jackson. He doesn't have those guys, folks. Have you paid attention to who he's got? Have you paid attention to who's lining up at receiver right now for the Washington Redskins? It's not a who's who, okay? It's not even all-pro who's who. It's just guys right now. That's who's lining up. We have a budding star in Josh Dotson, but he's learning. He is learning. There are times he disappears. On the other side, you've got Mo Harris. You've got Ryan Grant. I hope we don't have Ryan Clark, but as many injuries we may have Ryan Clark lining up one day. It's just he's making it work, and he's making it work very well. So, again, really good game. Run game, by far the best individual run game this year by a Redskin running back. Samaje Perine did exactly what Jay Gruden said last week he thought he could do, and that is, hey, get him some more carries. The more carries he gets, the better he's going to look. I thought he looked confident. He looked decisive, ripped off the 30-yard run, had another one late that helped set up the touchdown to Sprinkle that should have been the clinching touchdown. And again, I'm not going to try to say that Samaje Perine is the answer at this point because we don't know. Not enough information, but he did answer the bell on this one. He had an opportunity, and he took it. And going forward, that's what he's got to do. He's got 6 more games to prove that, hey, I can go into next season and be your running back. I can be your bell cow. I thought the O-line, another solid game. This is the Saints live on creating havoc up front, and I thought overall Cousins had time to do what he had to do. There were some hits, yes, but I thought overall the O-line played a solid game. Another good game from Chase Roulier. I continue to be impressed with this dude. Sean Laval goes out with the stinger again. In comes Ty Nsekhe at guard and played credible football. First time he'd ever done that. Just a testimony of how Callahan gets these guys ready to go week in, week out. Brandon Sheriff actually was Pro Football Focus's top-rated guard for the week. He graded out of the 90.6. If we can keep folks, we've got a great offensive line. We really do. If we can keep all the pieces healthy. Now, if you heard today, or if you haven't heard today, Spencer Long's been put on injured reserve. Sean Laval's been put on injured reserve, and that leaves. And Chase Roulier is out for what could be a little bit of an extended time because he had hand surgery for a wrist injury or something. They're not really clear as to what happened, but we just beat Slam up on the front line. So our starting center this week will be Tony Bergstrom. If you've never heard of him, there's a reason for that. I won't elaborate, but he's just a guy right now. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he turns into the hero of the game this week. I don't know. Bergstrom will go. I'm not sure what they'll do. Would they start Nsekhe at left guard in place of Laval? I'm not sure. But again, looks like we're on the shuffle again. Just when you think you've kind of climbed over that hill and can start coasting a little bit, we're reminded, nope, you can't. I thought tight ends, Vernon Davis again continues to be a wonder to me. He did have a couple of drops. The drop in overtime was huge. He had the first down and then some up around the 40, and he dropped it. He's going to make that catch, 9 times out of 10. But overall, a very good day for him. We continue, even without Jordan Reed, to get solid production. I mean, we do. We get production out of the tight end position, and I think the coaches have to come in for a lot of credit for that one. I thought that Chris Thompson was already impactful in this game. He caught a touchdown pass. He had a beautiful run on a draw play to get most of a 10-yard penalty back on a 1st and 20. Ended up with a 2nd and 4. That was huge. And then disaster strikes. He breaks a bone in his leg, and he's out for the rest of the year. And that is such a huge, huge loss for this offense because, we've lost offensive linemen, but we have other big men, and those other big men so far have been, adequate. But we don't have another Chris Thompson on the roster. We don't have another guy that does what he does in the way that he does it. His pass blocking, his pass protection is phenomenal. It's textbook. What he gives you in the pass game, not only on checkdowns, but in the screen game. He has a great feel for setting up his blocks, exploding through the creases. And then he's fantastic on wheel routes, runs them like a receiver. He's natural in the open field. He doesn't fight the football when it's coming to him. His body doesn't contort in weird ways, a la Matt Jones. This dude is just a great football player. He has a great presence. We wish him nothing but the best and a speedy recovery. But it's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see that guy get carted off like that. And again, that's one more piece that we don't have, and it'll, it's just one of those things. That's just a part of the playbook now that has to kind of go away, and that's tough. That's tough because he has been such a dominant part for the early part of the season. He was the big play guy. He was the dude averaging at one point he was averaging 18 yards a carry. So when you talked about, hey, how are we going to replace Deshaun Jackson? Well, for a decent chunk of this year, we replaced that type of impact with Chris Thompson. I'm not going to say it's going to be interesting. It's just going to be sad to see what happens with that position now not there anymore. Into the gap will step Byron Marshall. I know nothing about this guy. And I don't think the Redskins know a lot about him. I don't know. He has played receiver, so I think, again, you're talking about a guy that's probably pretty comfortable catching passes. But, again, how is he in pass pro? It's a big chunk of the offense that's out of here now. I've said this before. I've never seen a season like this. I have to go all the way back to 1992 to remember a season where the offensive line was this beat up. But when you look at the whole scope of the team, the injuries have just been incredible. And folks, I don't use injuries as an excuse, but in this day and age of free agency where depth is hard to come by, it has an effect on you. I mean, it just does. Right now, the Redskins aren't even close to putting their 11 best guys out there on offense right now. They're not even close. How they'll line up on Thursday on a short week and play against the New York Giants, I don't know. There's a lot of fight. There's a lot of pride with this football team, and I've been impressed week in, week out how they're able to come out and perform, and they're prepared and they're ready to play. So that's a great job by the coaching staff, and it's a great job by the players. The last 3 minutes of this game, we'll get to now we want to talk about this because a lot's been said about Kirk blew it, Jay blew it, everybody blew it. This was a group effort. I want to start with a play that is probably, I don't know, I've seen a couple of things written about it, but when we were watching the game, you remember Kobe Fleener caught a pass on that first scoring drive that pulled the Saints to within 8 points. He was wide open, caught it at like the 4-yard line, goes down. Oddly, I mean, I couldn't believe it. They were, and so the Redskins challenged the play. They felt like he bobbled the football. Well, obviously, on the replay, you could tell that was a catch all day long. Now, Jay Gruden came out and broke that play down, and he said, "Look, I got buzzed from the sideline. I mean, got buzzed from the booth. They said we think he may have bobbled it." Jay held the flag and looked several times at the scoreboard, hoping that they would put it up there. Now, the Saints, in the meantime, had rushed to the line and were fixing to run a play. At that point, Jay has an incredibly small amount of time to make a decision. Do I give up a timeout if this is wrong, or do I go ahead and call it? Now, he went ahead and called it, and the other thing he said is he felt like the defense needed a rest. They needed a blow. That decision, unfortunately, would come back to bite them because we really could have used that timeout late. I think the only thing you can – anyway – when you listen to that, it's not as egregious as I thought it was because I was pretty mad at that whole play. But when you're dealing with such a small amount of time to make that decision, and if there's a chance that Fleener bobbles this, it's a huge break for a defense that is completely on its heels. Again, it's an imperfect process, it's an imperfect science, and you're on the road, so those dudes aren't going to put that thing up on the big screen. Jay made a call, and unfortunately – it ended up hurting them on two fronts. So that's the first little chink in the armor, so to speak. The next play obviously would be the 3rd and 1. Count me in with the crew that says, why didn't we sneak it? I mean, why didn't we sneak? Football Outsiders did a in-depth study, I think it was last year, and found that play in particular was successful a little over 90% of the time. So I don't know if, if Samaje Perine makes that first down, we're not even having this discussion. That's obvious. But they decided to go with lead guard play, G lead, where Brandon Sheriff kicks out. Niles Paul, the fullback, he said vociferously on his Twitter account that his responsibility was the safety. There are people that felt like maybe Sheriff blocked out, led too far, and took Niles Paul's man. Clearly, Niles Paul could have filled that hole and taken the linebacker on. Perine at that point maybe could, as coaches when I was a kid, and you hear about, hey, run up that fullback's back. You take the football and you run up his back. I do think there was a missed block there. Niles, he didn't block anybody on that play. He ended up not blocking the safety or the next guy. I've never been a fan of off-tackle type plays on 3rd and 1, 3rd and shorts, goal-to-go type plays. I've always kind of subscribed to the John Madden theories. Hey, don't take it off the line of scrimmage. And I know that G lead is a power play, so it's not a pitch play. It's not a counter or something like that. But it is a play that kind of has a lot of moving parts. Would have much rather see them sneak it or just a dive play, something like that. But anyway, it ended up obviously not working. So that's something. And the Redskins right now are one of the worst teams in the league on 3rd and 1. Early in the season, they were one of the better teams. Now they've devolved into one of the worst teams. But it was a huge play. You make that play, you probably running the clock out, and you're walking out of here with a win. Again, the only thing you can do now is, the coaches, they'll have to file this away and say, hey, next time maybe let's try the sneak. Maybe let's not take it so far off the line of scrimmage. But definitely a massive play. And then the next play we'll look at would be the intentional grounding. What I want to say is this. A lot of people have turned this into a black mark against Kirk, that this is their example they point to, that hey man, this guy's garbage, he can't even execute a into the game scenario. But I think if you listen to Jay Gruden's and you listen to Kirk's account, you listen to those two, the coaches on the sideline interjected themselves into this play. If you listen to Kirk, he was going to hand the ball off. It was a run play. I mean, and at that point, that's what it's got to be. You're protecting yardage at that point. You don't want to have a play that gets anywhere near a big loss to take you out of field goal range. At the 34-yard line, you're well within Nick Rose's range. So you pound the football, you line up, you spike it, and you attempt the field goal. But Jay and some other coaches apparently were yelling from the sideline. They didn't like the look. Obviously, the Saints were crowding the line of scrimmage. They had double A gaps covered by the linebackers, so they were saying, throw it. Well, there is some confusion. Kurt seemed to think they wanted him to throw it out of bounds. Jay talked about an audible, but however you want to look at it, Kurt turns and throws the football out of bounds, and two receivers kind of moving up the field. Obviously, he went back. He said if he had to do it over again, he'd have just thrown it at Jamison Crowder's shins. But my problem, again, is a process problem. I think at this point, maybe the sideline overthought things just a little bit. Hey, if Samaje Perine gets tagged for a half-yard loss, that's not the end of the world. If he gets a yard, okay, fine. He got a yard. At that point in the game, I feel like it's less important. I feel like it's less important to think about, breaking a big one or getting massive positive yards. You want to do that, but you have to protect where you're at on the field. So I think Jay kind of interjected himself into this thing a little bit when maybe he should have stepped back and just let the play go. That's my take on it. Now, was it a penalty? It should not have been called a penalty. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that is the reason we lost. We should never have been in that position at all for a bad call by the officials to decide that football game or have a hand in deciding it. So I think if all you're going to do is come off and blame the officials, you kind of missed the point. You missed the big picture here. And the big picture is we collapsed in a huge way defensively. I'm not ready to say we collapsed offensively. We had some mistakes at the end. But this offense overall, on a big picture, from a big picture standpoint, did more than enough to win this football game. On the defensive side of the football, for 3 quarters, this unit played good football. Coverages overall were solid. They did a nice job on Alvin Kamara. I think a couple of times you saw Alvin Kamara's soul leave him and come back because of the way Bashad Breeland was hitting him. I mean, I thought at some point Kamara, I admire Kamara. That dude's tough because Breland stretched him out a couple of times, man. It was big-time hits. I thought really, especially the first half, I thought the pressure the Redskins brought was effective. They got to Drew Brees consistently, and it did alter his passes. He didn't have clear looks. I thought coverage was tight. I thought coverage overall, you didn't have any huge breakdowns, and I thought that's the score reflected that. So I felt like, again, it's so hard to hate on this defense because I feel like in some ways the wheels have come off this thing. This is the third straight game they've given up over 400 yards. And I remember saying a few weeks ago, usually when like in the Seahawks game, usually when you give up 400-plus yards, points are going to come. Well, we've seen that the last 2 weeks. They allowed over 500 to the Saints in this game. I thought it, and so I feel like a little bit like the dam has broke. Mark Ingram ran all over them. If the Saints had run Mark Ingram more, this game may have been very different. They had no answer for Mark Ingram. Poor job tackling, poor angles. Run fits were bad. When they decided to buckle the chin straps and run the football, they got the stuff they needed out of that thing. Thought it was a horrible job in run defense. The play in the secondary, again, I thought was solid for most of the game, and that's borne out by the fact that they had 16 points with about 3 minutes to go. The Saints had 16 points, and then it just all went bad. When the Redskins took the field, leading 31-16 with just over 5 minutes to go, the one thing they could not do was give up a fast score. What did they do? They gave up a score in less than 2 minutes. Unbelievable. The Saints in that drive didn't face a third down once. I don't know what happened. I don't know if collectively we hit a wall to where guys were just tired enough. I don't know. But all of a sudden, what I do know is that Kobe Fleener all game long was silent until the final two drives. And then he killed us. We've had trouble all year with a tight end. And we had trouble last year with a tight end. And the year before with a tight end. So that's still something we're not good at doing, is defending a tight end. But we had blown assignments. We had missed tackles. It was just a how-to in not to play defense. And then when the Redskins gave the ball back on the third and after the 3rd and 1 play, I'm still sort of Buffalo at 87 yards. 87 yards in another 2 minutes or so. That's bad defensive football. And again, gaps. Drew Brees was 11 for 11 for like 162 in this. And then the final touchdown to Alvin Kamara. I mean, come on, did we forget how to tackle? The ball gets bobbled. If Bashaud Breeland can lay a hit, when we really needed Bashaud to lay a hit on him, he couldn't. He could have separated him from that ball completely. But that drive reminded me so much of the Lions game last year, where Stafford took them down, scored, and it was just like hot knife going through butter. I'm really kind of worried right now. I thought Martrell Spate struggled. Martrell Spate is better in and around the line of scrimmage. Not great in coverage at all. Zach Brown, you can tell, is slowed by this Achilles issue. He has been nowhere near as impactful these last 2 games as he was in the previous games. He's been very quiet, nowhere near as explosive. And I'll tell you another guy I think is more hurt than we think is Josh Norman. Josh Norman's struggling right now. And that's not hating on him. It's just, it's an observation. I don't know if the rib – and folks, rib injuries don't get better in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. They don't. I mean, that's something you deal with for a long time. I don't know if he's got something else going, but the last 2 weeks he has looked nothing like the Josh Norman that we're used to seeing. The safety play in this game was atrocious. DJ Swearinger had the pick. Great job coming over. Thought for the rest of the game he had some missed tackles, but the most egregious safety play came from D. Hall, and I hate saying that because I think a lot of that guy, but boy, he was a liability. I try not to bore you with a ton of stats, but a guy posted on Twitter some of D. Hall's numbers. Anyway, they were pretty shocking. Now, before you think I'm just dumping all over this guy, I'm not. D'Angelo Hall probably shouldn't be playing. He had a bone bruise. They weren't sure he was even going to be able to play. But Monte Nicholson goes down. D. Hall's next man up, and he's doing his best. He missed 3 of his 8 tackle attempts, allowed all 4 of his targets to be completed for 67 yards and a touchdown. On that touchdown, it was amazing. On that touchdown pass, that was the first fourth-quarter touchdown that the Saints had scored. He completely left his man in the flat to go outside towards the pylon in the end zone. Left his guy wide open. I don't know if Breeze influenced him there, which Breeze is great at. Tight area, you can't drop coverage like that. Now, that was the first game that really he was a huge liability. It's hard to say that because, again, this guy's fought to get back on the field, and he was so good in the Seattle game. But, again, in this game, completely different situation, completely different dynamic, completely different type of offense. He really, really struggled. I think on the D-line right now, Matt Ioannidis trying to play, and again, I appreciate it because we need him to, but you're nowhere near as effective with a club on your hand. It's so hard to disengage. Your hands and your hand placement and hand fighting is so important as a defensive tackle. Trying to get guys off of you, it's hard to grab, it's hard to shed with one hand. McClain went down with a toe injury. We have a very young Anthony Lanier getting a lot more snaps than we probably thought he would this year. But I just think we're just kind of running on empty on right now in the middle of that line, and it's showing. I think the defense fights, but one thing, there's so many things that have become there's several things that have become a trend with this team though. Again, Rich Tandler brought this up. He did an article, and if you're not following Rich on Twitter, you need to. This guy is fantastic. Been covering the Redskins for years. But the Redskins right now have fallen to 29th in the league in scoring defense. They've given up 266 points on the season. 96 of those points have been scored in the last 3 minutes of the first and second halves. Opponents have put up 12 touchdowns, 8 one-point conversions, 2 two-point conversions, and 4 field goals. Man, that's pathetic. That is pathetic. And what it does is it completely undoes all the good that you've done in the run-up to the first half and at the end of the game. And if you think about it, we had a meltdown against the Chiefs late. We almost had a meltdown against San Francisco late that cost us the game. We had a little meltdown against Seattle. They got 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter that made they had 2 points through most of the game and then exploded for 2 touchdowns. It's interesting how things become trends, and last year it was third down defense. This year, it's scoring before the half, and right before halftime, the Redskins blow an opportunity to get 3 themselves with the false start by McGee, end up letting the Saints go down and kick a field goal. So I don't know if they can get that part of the ship righted in 6 games or not. Again, they're another unit that's beat up. That is something that I think that has to be an emphasis. That's got to be a point of emphasis by the coaches. They've got to do a better job at the end of the half, because in between those areas, they seem to play pretty good football. They fight and scrap and keep scores manageable for the most part. But again, it was just a disastrous 2 drives, and you felt like you knew if the Redskins didn't go down and score a touchdown to end this thing in overtime, once the Saints got the ball, it was probably going to be over. And it was embarrassing the way it was over because it was just 2 runs. 2 runs by Mark Ingram, picks up about 50 yards, kick a field goal. And maybe there's some guys in the locker room that need to get embarrassed and need to get mad. I don't know, but too many missed assignments. And again, this is the kind of thing that the coaches have to go back and say, hey, did we try to do too much? What was the communication like? Were guys not getting the calls in, to line up correctly? I don't know, but something they've got to get that fixed. The Redskins are going to play on close margins for the entire rest of the season, I think. I don't see these games against the Giants or against the Chargers or anybody being blowouts. So little things like that matter. And if we're going to put together some kind of run here at the end of the season, that's got to get fixed. Special teams, really for the most game, was a disaster. The false start by McGee is unforgivable. To take a shot at 3 points off the board. Take a shot at 3 points. And then to add insult to injury, Tressway booms a beautiful punt. Joshua Holsey positions himself, you're thinking, at the 1 foot line, and he takes a step back. Heels on the goal line. That's huge. I mean, that's huge to go from the 1 foot line all the way out to the 20. And so between losing the ability to kick the field goal and then punting subsequently, the Saints only lost 18 yards. of field position. The Redskins came out way on the short end of the stick. Still continue to be impressed with Nick Rose. Right now, this guy's doing everything Dustin Hopkins did. I think at the very least, we're going to have a kicking competition next year between those two guys. So I've been very happy. I thought Way punted well. I thought the punt coverage in this game was terrible. Way too many yards on punt returns. Very unhappy with that. Still not really getting anything return-wise. The biggest impactful play that the special teams had was the fake punt. And Chet and I were watching that game, and, Chet plays Madden a lot, and he's a savage at it. Chet's my son, by the way, and he's a savage at it. Goes for it on fourth down with impunity. In fact, he loves to get to fourth down so he can make the other team look bad. And he'll fake punt. It doesn't matter. So to him, he was loving it. To me, I was in shock because I'm thinking we just went for a fake punt on our side of the 30-yard line. I mean, we were inside our 30 and we went for the fake punt. I think it spoke to it was desperation football, and I loved it. I'm glad that they didn't just concede. Maybe Gruden felt like, hey, look, at some point my defense is going to break, and I'm going to need an extra drive, and this is it. So I like the call. Now, if he had missed it, man, wow. The blowback from that probably would have been epic. But I just don't think you can blame him for thinking aggressive like that and trying to create some opportunities for his team, And it was well thought out, well executed, and the Redskins were able to take advantage of it. Unfortunately, it did not lead to a win. So I'm going to close this one out. I'm tired of wallowing in this one. New York on Thursday night. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be close. Hopefully the Redskins can, find a way to pressure Eli. Still worried about this run defense. And the Giants seem to have found something with this Darkwa guy and the Wayne Gallman. So I think that'll help keep the Giants in it. And we'll see what happens, with the O-line and how that all shakes out. If the Redskins can be consistent on the ground again, shorten some drives, kind of eat clock, then I think we got a real good shot to come out of here with a win, and they desperately need it. They desperately need it, and because this team deserves a win. They're beat up, but they bring their lunchbox every day, and at no point have you felt like this team has showed up unprepared or not ready to work. And so you want guys like that to have good results. So let's just go out there and get a win, guys. Okay. That's it. Let's make Turkey Day special. Let's make Turkey Day great again. That's all.
You like that? You like that?